I have to confess that one of the things that I've been feeling as we come towards the end of the year is a great sense of weariness in terms of all the struggles that we have witnessed, the upheavals among nations, our economy, our families, the great disparity that has been revealed between those who have and those who have not, as we have seen this pandemic take a stronger hold of people who are poor and less advantaged than many of us are. But if there is a weariness, there also is a sense of an increased awareness of our blessings. One person said that one of the things he does when he gets up in the morning is he pours himself a nice fresh cup of coffee and then goes to smell it. And then in smelling the coffee, he's assured that he doesn't have the COVID. And then he says he feels the day is going to be okay. It was a light way of looking at the trauma that has afflicted the whole world. But if we're more conscious of the weariness, and the gospel today says, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you are heavily burdened and weary, and take my yoke upon you. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." So if we have been burdened by many uncertainties and upheavals and disappointments and distresses in practically every single way that you can think, I think of also the great blessings that we perhaps are more mindful of that we used to take for granted. Perhaps the fact that when so many people have been isolated from each other and are not able to have that human contact, anytime we can talk to our loved ones, see them, know that they are well, share with them, even if it's from a distance, even with all spatial distancing, that is a blessing that some people, especially the very elderly who are in places of, in nursing homes, they've been burdened by being so isolated. And so as we think about All Souls and All Saints the day before, and the communion of the saints, which links us both to our souls, the souls of our loved ones, and the saints, our heroes of our Christian faith, we acknowledge that All Souls has to do lots of times with not just praying for the people who have passed from this life, but for trying to come to grips in our hearts, with the sense of grief and the sense of loss that we experience when we lose the people that we love. And even though our faith tells us that this is not a permanent separation, the souls of the just are in the hands of God, and no torment shall touch them. They seemed in view of the foolish to be dead, and their passing away was thought an affliction, and their going forth from us utter destruction, but they are at peace. Even though we celebrate that as a companion to All Souls Day, following upon the communion, the Feast of All Saints, it still is an opportunity for us to acknowledge the aching of the human heart and the sense of grief and loss. And for lots of people, there's been many losses over this amazingly troubled year, 2020. And I think we have to set this at the altar as well and raise it up to God. In the wonderful letter, the Gospel of St. John, he talks about, there was a man who was sent from God whose name was John. He came to bear witness to the light. He himself was not the light, but the light of God was coming into the world, and the darkness grasped it not. And to anyone who did grasp it, enabled them to become children of God. And that is what we call to mind. Probably should do it every day while we're smelling the coffee, getting up in the morning, is to remember that the world with all its troubles can never be a truly dark place because it is not abandoned by God. That God is with us in all things, as our reading says, the second reading today from Romans. What can we do then in the midst of acknowledging a tremendous loss and a sense of grief? Well, it is to acknowledge a part of what the wisdom literature. You know, in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, let me get my Bible, hold on. These are the things that people wrote down thousands of years ago to help us understand how we would get through life. And chapter 3, Ecclesiastes, which is often read at funerals, many people pick it. It says there is an appointed time for everything, and a time for every affair under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot the plant. And it goes on and it says, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. And this strikes me more and more as this year unfolds, a time to embrace and a time to be far from embraces, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to rend and a time to sew up, a time to be silent and a time to speak up, a time to love, a time to hate, a time of war, a time of peace. And then he says, what advantage has the worker from his toil? Because a person works hard and they go through life and then they die and then everything goes to somebody else. And it says, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, and a chase after the wind. And so while it would seem to have a sense of giving in to the fragility of life, it then goes on in 2 more chapters to say this. This is what I recognize as good. It is well for a woman or man to eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labor under the sun during the limited days of the life which God gives them, for this is their lot. And any person to whom God gives riches and property and grants power to partake of them, so that they receive their lot and find joy in the fruits of their labors, well, they have a gift from God, and they will hardly dwell on the shortness of their life, because God lets them busy themselves with the joy of their heart. And this is what I think it means when Jesus says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart, and your souls will find rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And that image of the yoke, it means that whatever burdens we carry in this life, we never carry them alone. That Jesus is by our side, with us in all things. We've got plenty of music that talks about that. I love the wonderful song, Precious Lord, Take My Hand, Lead Me On. You know, I'm tired, I am weak, I am worn. This yoke of Jesus is something that the candles remind us of as they scatter the darkness, either of our hearts or of our room or of our world, like the Easter candle, the Paschal candle, the risen Christ, the morning star. There is an old song. Where is it? Right here. It says this, and it kind of reminds me of the point of view of the people in Ecclesiastes who are trying to measure the worth of our lives and our lifespan and how people come and go, and there's nothing new under the sun. But in that moment where we exist with one another, we also exist with God. And that means that we never walk alone. Here's the little song, I think it came out in 1951, something like that. It said, somebody bigger than you and I. You might be familiar with Elvis Presley singing it a long time ago. Who made the mountains? Who made the trees? Who made the rivers that flow to the sea? And who sends the rain when the earth is dry? Somebody bigger than you and I. Who made the flowers bloom in the spring? Who wrote the songs for the robins to sing, and who hung the moon in the starry sky? Somebody bigger than you and I. He lights the way when the road is long. He keeps you company. With his love to guide you, he walks beside you, just like he walks with me. When I am weary, filled with despair, who gives me courage to go on from there? And who gives me faith that will never die? Somebody bigger than you and I. That's the yoke we take upon ourselves. That means we don't carry the burdens by our own strength. That means we have God with us in all things. It is a covenant, a marriage covenant that the Lord makes with us. He espouses himself to us in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, in richness and in poverty. So however impoverished the year has been so far, and however drear and deep the loss is of those who have died in this year, whom we have loved, we remember that they are with God, and one day we too shall be. Billy Collins was the poet laureate of the United States, and he wrote some very accessible poems. And he had one very short poem called The Dead. It says, "The dead are always looking down on us, they say, while we're putting on our shoes or making a sandwich. They are looking down through the glass-bottom boats of heaven as they row themselves slowly through eternity. They watch the tops of our heads moving below on earth, and when we lie down in a field or on a couch, comforted perhaps by the hum of a warm afternoon, they think we are looking back at them, which makes them lift their oars and fall silent and wait, like parents, for us to close our eyes." Isn't that a tender image, that as we are mindful of those who have gone before us, our saints, our loved ones, that they are also mindful of us, and of course that's the communion of saints. We wish to pay honor to the names of those who have died in this year. And in order to do this, we're going to change our camera viewpoint. So that you can see at home. Thank you for sending in the pictures. We have them on our altar from the beginning of this Mass, and we show them now as we honor their names and their life. Anthony Barone. Mary Yinger. John Wessel. Debbie Thomas. Jeanette Silva. Thomas Pinedeth, Mel Phillips, Matthew Paris, Priscilla Murphy, Joan Kelso, Monica Rose Fallon. Her birthday is this week. She passed in January. Al Estrada, Mike Boxty, we reverently place these pictures upon our altar, whereon we place the gifts of bread and wine, signs of God's eternal love for us. May their soul and the souls of all the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen.